Hey Ham, how are you?
Pretty good. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for coming on, man. Appreciate it. This is a long time in the making.
Yeah,
Um, so I know
I've been avoiding this call for a long time, as you know.
I appreciate it. It's not natural when two people have known each other for as long as we have and like to sit here and record a conversation. It's kind of weird, kind of awkward.
I think it's weirder for you and me because we just get on the phone and we talk for a long time. So to actually make it official, that's why it's super weird. Because we get on the phone and we'll talk for 3 hours, and it's like nothing. Or every time you come back to Vietnam, we'll go on a drive and we'll just talk for hours.
And
So
there's
yeah,
another problem too with this is we both know in the back of our heads like it's recorded. And so that's another tricky thing that we have to
little sensors go on.
yeah. And all the friends that I talk to have this we all like change for the camera because it's going to be on for a long time and people go back to this for reference. So a little
I
tricky.
think that's the difference, though, because the thing is that's the reason why I really was nervous to do this, because I don't change for the camera, because you know me.
Yeah.
I'm this
Keep it real.
way everywhere all the time. So and that's why it's like, oh man, I might say some stuff that I might not want to say. So yeah.
Well, my job is to warm you up and get this conversation going in a way that's not incriminating to the both of us. Um,
Cool.
well, here's the question. I start this out with everybody, and it actually came from, I'm going to credit Bao for, inspiring me to ask this question because I think it ties in our community worldwide. It goes back in the history books and it propels us into the future. What does being Vietnamese mean to you today, right now?
Yeah, that's always the hard question to answer. You like Even though I've heard this question, that you just you did prep me about, I don't know how to answer this question. Because for me, like, being Vietnamese is really, it's a way of being. It's not, I don't know how to describe it, other than in terms of expressions. It's like anh em bà con, it's you chơi, it's just the way that we're very community minded, while at the same time, like, even though we're individuals, we're very community minded. And it's that whole camaraderie, about being in a family. Um, and I feel that because, though this might hit on the question that you thought you might not be able to ask, but okay, so I'm ethnically Chinese Vietnamese, right? And the first time I went to, like, freaking China, I landed in Shanghai. I was like, oh wow, that's the feeling. Like, oh wow, this city is more modern than I thought. However, the first time that I came back to Vietnam, I left in 1982. I came back when I did Nuke, the documentary, right? The first time I came back into Vietnam and I got out, it was as if my skin had been dead for since from 1982 to 1999, 98,
Wow.
99, because it came alive, because the smell of Vietnam, the humidity, the feel of it, seeing the clouds. I remember it was, oh wow, these clouds are so beautiful. Wow, they're so much different compared to the clouds in the US. It's a different feeling when I came back to Vietnam, because I left when I was 8, you know? And so to be able to go to the Anh Chè on the streets, you know, that's dessert, right? Vietnamese dessert. Or just go have a bowl of pho just on the street, right? And just seeing people out on the street past 10 p.m. That's Saigon. That's Vietnam for me, because that's a feeling that your skin knows when you're
Wow.
back in your homeland, right? So that's what being Vietnamese for me. And being able to tell those stories, being able to hear stories, find out stories, talk to people, you know? Um, yeah, because I think that it's, to this day, one of the more gratifying work that I've done, and it did not pay very much, was when I was working for Vang Sung and going on tours with their shows. But the most important part was doing the travel shows with Vic
Mm.
Tao, where we talked to Vietnamese people, So it's just going around the world and going to these pockets of Vietnamese communities and talking to Vietnamese people and hearing their stories, how they overcame, their struggle as immigrants, and how they started their own business, how they were successful, how they're not successful. In Cambodia, we were interviewing people who lived in floating villages, and they had no citizenship. Even they were living stateless. They had nothing. We were distributing bags of rice for them. We were finding out stories about human trafficking. Those stories fed to sort of inspired me to want to do something to help them. And that's the reason why, for example, like Back Home was born, right? Hollow, the movie, because I wanted to tell a story to shed light on human trafficking. But I'm not a documentary filmmaker. I don't have the discipline for documentary filmmaking. But I also wanted to make something that haunted people, just like I was haunted when I heard the story. So I was like, no, maybe I'll make a horror film. I'll tell the story as a horror film so that people can see that, there's so many things that you're afraid of. You're afraid of ghosts, you're afraid of all this stuff, but true horror is what human beings do to each other.
Yeah.
Right. That's even scarier. And so, that's the kind of stuff that for me was my connection to Vietnam. And I think that in particular, since I left at 8, I'm not that Vietnamese. Even coming back here, a lot of people, they still have this attitude, like, oh, he's very cute. And I am. I can't get that American side out because I grew up, my formative years were in America. However, I still think that my roots are very, very Vietnamese,
right?
Particularly Vietnamese, despite my ethnic Chinese, Vietnamese roots. But inside, my core is very Vietnamese. And talking to Vietnamese people, hearing their stories, that's the stuff that actually drives me, And I think it's driven a lot of my films. I think there's only like two factors. So like one is family, because all of my films are about family, and I think because I left when I was 8, the other thing is how to reconcile your childhood with what now you have become,
right?
Like how to reconcile childhood with who we are now as adults, because I feel like, and I've said this in many interviews before, we spend a half of our lives growing and the other half of our lives recovering, right? From the pain of growth, from the changes of growth. And so a lot of my films are about that. It's about that, looking back, and trying to hold on to something. And you'll see those themes like everywhere in all of my films. Yeah.
How do you feel about the growing changes in Vietnam from the early days of you coming back to now? I mean, it's changing, it's modernizing. How does that make you feel?
Forget early days. The cool thing about living in Vietnam is that it's electric and it's constantly changing. Next month, the city will look completely different from this month because stuff is always happening. I live in District 3. There's a shop across the street from me. In the last year, it's gone through 4 different hands, through 4 different businesses, right? And of course, more so because of COVID. But even before COVID, like 2 different businesses had changed hands since I've lived here. And so, but you see it in the landscape. You see it in, if somebody were to take a shot of the skyline of Vietnam from District 2, looking back at District 1, every year you see like the whole, that skyline changes dramatically, right? I mean, it was just Bitexco, not so long ago, Bitexco was the tallest building, and now Landmark is the highest building. And now they're trying to build more buildings and more skyscrapers, more apartment buildings. So it's crazy. Living here, you really feel how alive the city is. And that's the thing that's very different when I go back to the US, because then you feel how much slower of a pace US works. Like when you're comparing to the hustle in Vietnam, in Saigon. A lot of people, they do the Saigon hustle, dude. And that's just like running around making money, you know? That's the Saigon hustle.
Yeah, and it's ironic that you say that, because when people that are coming to visit and to hang out, like Vitkios, to Saigon, it doesn't, if you're not working there, time does feel slower, and it does feel faster in the US. But I think when you're working, and you're working now in modern times, I think the Vietnamese are moving a lot faster than we are here in the US.
Yeah, it's very interesting because you see, and it's also a very different way of working, right? People go to like, oh, you know, they go have cafe, they go nyao, that's where all the business is done. That's all where all the work is being done, right?
Yeah.
So it's a funny way to like mix business and pleasure. But you know, when you go to the wine cafe, you're talking to somebody, and then you're like, oh yeah, that sparks an idea. Oh yeah, we should totally do this. We should totally do that, right? You know, I've met more people interested in investing in film by going to a cafe. You know, now of course I get invited all the time, but I never go because I'm trying not to drink so much. But I find these days I'm actually doing that more often because of the work. But yeah, but that's where the work is being done. It's getting together and meeting with people, and you will see this. I don't know if you noticed this, but have you, like for me, when I came back to Vietnam, and maybe it's because a lot of my friends have moved back to Vietnam, but those same friends, before they moved back to Vietnam, I never see them. I never freaking see them, right? They live in OC.
Yep.
They live in OC. It's a 10, 15-minute drive away. Or when I was living in LA, my friend was living in Westwood. They were like, hey, let's meet. No, man, you're all the way in on the east side. I'm on the west side, you know? And we never meet. But I come back to Vietnam and I see more of my friends here than I do there. And it's so much easier to see them.
Yeah, I wonder what
right?
that is. I wonder, why do we not see each other when we're living in the US? But
I think it's the travel mentality. Like when you're away, and so you kind of like you tend to gravitate towards the people, you know, the comforts of home, the familiarity. So when their mindset, they're traveling. So when they're away and a friend says, hey, why don't you come out and have some coffee? They'll go out and have some coffee. But when they're at home, friend says, go have some coffee. I got this thing I got to do, you know? Yeah. So it's, you know, yeah. It's like, you don't want to see your friend unless he's sick, you know?
Yeah. So I know you didn't start out in your early years daydreaming about becoming a film director, right?
Mm-hmm.
You, as a kid, I mean, did you gravitate towards, you know, like my brother, you know, he's all into action figures and cartoon and drawing. Like, what were you into when you were growing up?
Oh no, I was totally into that. I was into comic books. I used to draw like Jim Lee. For those who don't know, he's one of my favorite artists. So I used to like draw comic books and things like that. But I was never, my problem is this: I always dabbled in art ever since I was a kid. Ever since I learned how to strum my fingers on a table, you know, to follow the rhythm of a music. My dad taught me that, or to learn how to sing when my aunt Michael Sao taught me that, because every time we have cupding in Vietnam, there's a blackout. You know, we go out into the courtyard, the front yard of the house, and then we'll just sing and tell stories, horror stories, you know, or ghost stories, things like that. My uncle played the guitar. So I was introduced to art at a very, very young age, and I dabbled in it because art was never something that you were supposed to do professionally. Ah, man, my little screen turned off. It's too bad. I had a good screensaver on it. Yeah, so art, you know, art was never something that you would do professionally. Art is something that you were only supposed to do on the side. You know, when the lights went out, then you can do art, right?
Wow.
And I continued that though. When I came over to the U.S., I painted, I sculpted, I did woodwork, even in play. You know, like when I was a kid, when I played, I saw Thundercats, and I took a pine wood and I whittled it into a sword, and I sawed off the handle, so it's got that insignia, that claw handle with the little Thundercats emblem, and I painted that. So I painted the whole sword. In my mind, the sword is white, right? On TV, it's not silver, it's not metallic. So I painted the stupid blade white, right? And I painted the whole thing. I used to make, I was a weird kid though, like when 1982. What were people listening to? What were people listening to? What were you listening to in 1982? Michael Jackson, Madonna,
New Wave,
right? Right. Well, New Wave is still different, right? Because that's in the Vietnamese side. And you always get that. You always get that Lobo, ABBA.
We got to talk about that.
Talking. But I'm talking about like music, American music. What do you listen to, right? You listen to Prince. You listen to Michael Jackson. You listen to Madonna. I was listening to Styx, Queen, Beatles.
But how did you get
Led Zeppelin
to that?
So I was people like, what kind of music are you listening to? Yeah, but it was very different, growing up in elementary school, people are like, what the hell are you listening to? They'll come over to my house to play and I'll be listening to Queen, right?
How did you get exposed to that in the early 80s?
Oh, very interesting. So it's basically, we got exposed to it. I got exposed to it through my brother, and he was introduced to it through Uncle. Really cool. Oh, I've never told this story. This is the first time. How many years we known each other? When we came over to the US in 82, my aunt sponsored us. She lived in Reseda. My dad got a phone call from Bác Yến. Bác Yến is the wife of the high-ranking official whom my dad was a chauffeur for during the war. And so Nguyen, I think that's his name. He was in the re-education camp after the war. He didn't get out until the 90s. So she and Nguyen were here in the US. They left at the end of the war. They resettled in Orange County. She heard somehow, you see, and this is the miracle. And that's the reason why that went into the storytelling of Journey from the Fall. A lot of people are like, that's unbelievable. How are you guys able to connect with each other if you haven't seen each other? Miracles happen, and you stay connected to people in various ways, So she found out that my dad was in the States. She drove up to Reseda and took us down to OC because she's like, why are you in Reseda? There's nobody in Reseda. And it was true. You go to Reseda to die, according to the Cake song. So many references in that one line. So she drives up to Reseda, picks us up, takes us down to OC, and takes us to Little Saigon, which did not even really exist at the time. It was just one little store, and at the corner of Ward and Bolsa, the Baskin Robbins that used to be there. There used to be a little Vietnamese restaurant. That's where we went, and she goes, this is where the Vietnamese people have all come together. It's going to grow. It's going to continue growing. You need to be here. So my dad and my mom and dad were like, yeah, let's move down here. And you know what? Bác Yến, I have to be so grateful to her. She took us into her 2-bedroom apartment in Santa Ana. The whole family, it was the 6 of us, right? So my mom and my sisters, my mom and my 2 sisters, they would stay with Bác Yến in Bác Yến room, right? My dad would sleep in the living room on the sofa, and my brother and I would share Nguyen's room, her son, right? So Nguyen was mad about Queen. He used to listen to Queen all the time. And so that's how he introduced it to my brother, and that's how I learned Queen. Like,
you must have been just 9 or 10, right?
I was 8.
8.
I was 8, yeah.
And then,
so like I said, it's the formative years,
Yeah, you're tiny. But I wonder how he got a hold of these albums, because in those years, it wasn't like you could download it. You could just go to Spotify.
You could go record shopping. These albums were released on records. So the very first Queen album I heard was their Greatest Hits album, which had all of their hits, right? And then after that, my brother and I, we would just go to like a local, I didn't even think Target existed. It was called Zodi's. There was this store called Zodi's, or Music Plus was a place where you can go to get music, right? Tower Records. So we used to go to Music Plus, which was right by our house, and we buy these records. We bought every single album. We used to have every single Queen album on vinyl, every ABBA album, every Bee Gees album, all on vinyl, right? My dad threw it all out, dude.
Oh my God.
In like around the year in the 1990s, when we moved finally to a different home, he just threw out all the records. We're like, dude, if you could see them, because we had the works, right? The original, vinyl that was released. You know how much that's worth? Just to listen to it, So we had like the Queen album, like the works, or It's Kind of Magic. All those albums that were released after the 1980s, after we arrived in the U.S. Like we had all of the original vinyls for them. But I was listening to all that, so I was very influenced by that. I used to paint and draw. Like look, we were what do they call those keychain babies? Uh, yeah, something. Yeah, and so I go to school in the morning, I come home in the afternoon and just watch like PBS shows, like this guy who paints with watercolor acrylics or oils, and then I sit there and watch the TV and paint and draw with the guy. I used to make little bird paintings. I had this book, bought this book, and I would make bird paintings on blocks of wood, and my mom would feel so proud. She would put them up all over the room. And I draw, superheroes and things like that. I think I was always into the art, but the problem with me being a sketch artist, that kind of stuff, is that I can't visualize it in my head and draw it on paper. But whatever I see, I can do. Right. So that's how I used to do Jim Lee drawings. I would be looking at, ooh, this panel is cool, and I draw the entire panel. My friends are like, what the hell? And I got to the point where I was really good. I would just freehand and then see it and then draw it straight from on a Sharpie. Right. I used to make I'd buy these white shirts and draw, Iceman on a shirt for my friend. I drew a Wolverine for myself. I drew another character for my other friend. So I used to do a lot of that stuff. And I was always, drawn towards the arts. When I went to UCLA and I started UCLA undergrad, and I didn't even, my major was in English, and I started doing poetry. I started creating my own poetry club, and joining a poetry newsletter. I joined Justin Lin's group, Pack Arts or Pact or something like that. They had a group that he had created with he and Justin, Quentin, and I forget the other guy. He was in the theater school, so they started a group for Asian Americans. So I joined that. But so I've always been in love with the arts. I just didn't know how to put it all together, right? And so I think that when I finally discovered film, I was like, oh yeah, this is a good place. You don't have to know a lot about everything, but you can apply everything into this one thing.
Can I stop you right there? Can I stop?
Yeah.
When I look at you, or as I've known you, I think the exact opposite. It's so weird because you're one of the few guys that I know that knows a lot about everything. And then that ability of knowing so much about music. So I don't know, a lot of people don't probably know this about you, but the immense amount of music knowledge that you have, both through performing it and knowing exactly like the categories or the bands and the names and the songs and the melody. It's like, I've yet to find anybody who in my group knows as much as you do. Maybe,
of course you do. His name's Anderson, and he knows everything.
That first. Maybe Anderson, but as in terms of a filmmaker, a director, I mean, I always felt like you know so much about it, and then you really distill it down and put it into your stories. I think that's very necessary as a director. But I have a question though. Your parents never stopped you from art? I mean, because Asians, we're like, oh, you got to go make money. You know, it sounds like they really nurtured that side of you to have the confidence to do it.
Didn't quite. My mom was the only nurturing one. My dad was the opposite of nurturing. You know, like I remember when I when I graduated high school, uh, I I went to UCLA and I was gonna be. I actually, when I was studying literature, I also love kids. So I was gonna be a, because what do you do with an English degree when you graduate, right? As an undergrad. And
But you wanted to study English going into UCLA?
no, 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 no. I applied to UCLA in the School of Engineering.
Wow.
And
What would make you?
yeah, I applied. Huh?
Why engineering?
Oh, because I love to, like, I always love to tinkle with things to see how things are made.
Yeah.
Like literally like mechanical engineering. That stuff fascinates me even to this day. Like I'm fascinated about how the world works, how everything works, and I always like to open up the box and see what's inside and see what makes things run. I think even just before this call, I was watching different YouTube videos about like new forms of battery, like water battery, and how people are finding renewable energy. So it's just like little random things, right? But yeah, I applied for the School of Engineering. It was too impacted. They said, sorry, we can't accept you for engineering. However, we think your grades are amazing. We'd like to have you at our school if you don't mind picking another major. So I was like, well, I always loved, I started the poetry club in high school, whatever. He was in drama and a poetry club. Gotta wonder about this kid. So I was like, I'll choose literature because I always loved reading and literature. So my English, my major was English, and yeah, so I got into that. Thank God. I don't think I would have been a very good engineer. So I got into English and then, continued my poetry and started writing plays. But while I was doing that, a lot of people don't know this. I had a really good friend, Jared, from high school, and he used to make his own comic book club. We used to have, lunch together and stuff. But he is a musical savant. He plays every single musical instrument. His background is Irish. So he plays the guitar, he plays the bass, he plays a little bit of even a trumpet, I remember.
He's like
piano. So yeah, so and his mom was very supportive of him. So I just go over to his house and we'd have jam sessions. I taught myself how to play the guitar. And my brother bought the guitar, and I stole his guitar and started playing it for myself, and started looking up chords, going to the music shops, and just seeing like the finger, because I don't know how to read music. I don't know music, but I would see like the finger patterns, and then I go, oh, okay. Then so I started learning songs on my own, and so I'd go over to Jared's house and we start jamming, and then pretty soon we have a nice repertoire of songs, and so we were like, we should perform in coffee houses. We should perform in coffee houses. So I was like, yeah, man, that's a good thing. And then I would go home and I started practicing at home. My dad, he hears it. He goes, what the hell are you doing? He's a voice like that. What, you think people are gonna want to pay to hear you play? Like there's like the worst thing that you can say to somebody to completely discourage them, just pull the rug from right under them. That was my dad when he came to music, right? So that's why I was always like very nervous, and I only sang in the car, in the showers, and and then and when I go karaoke with my friends, because I would not dare to sing in public, and so that never happened, and all we did was we ended up just doing our own jam sessions at home. We never actually went outside. I think I still have a cassette tape of when I recorded us jamming at Jared's house, and we would play different things like Beatles, Crowded House, lots of different stuff.
And you said he's Irish?
he's Irish American. Of course, he was born in America, but his family's Irish.
Because you
So
always you used to always bust out the Irish accent when Stefan was around. Is that where you got it from? No,
no, no, no, no, no, no. I bust out the Irish accent because I love, so many good musicians are Irish,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
was like totally into Enya, Clannad and stuff at the time. So I used to listen to a lot of Irish music. Celtic music, that was what it was called back in the day. So I just like buy all these Celtic music CDs, Celtic combination, compilations. Yeah, no, that Irish accent stuff. That Irish accent stuff is like when I used to fuck around with my best friend, Brendan Hahn is his name, and we used to like watch Braveheart and just do the Braveheart accent. But Han did the best one. His accent was really, really good. So that's where I got it from. Just fucking around, watching films with my friends. But yeah, and you can see like just a lot of the films that I make is all of the influences that I had when I was a kid. Really, that's about it. Like I think even my comedy style right now, when I make my comedies, you can totally see it's all influenced by Three's Company, Seinfeld.
Yeah.
Just the beats of it, because back then the writing it's so sharp, it's so succinct, that became a model for me for comedy. Yeah.
So you studied literature at UCLA. Was there a focus in the literature, or was it
just English literature? And so the thing is I was missing out on all those Asian American studies. I'd hardly taken any Asian American studies courses. That's how freaking Americanized I was. You have to understand. And that's why, my Vietnamese was so bad, because I'd stopped speaking Vietnamese. My friends were Vietnamese. Han was Vietnamese. His name is Huong, but he doesn't call himself Huong. He calls himself Han. Like, who the fuck,
How do you get Han from
his name is Huong? Yeah, Huong, and my friend, but so you want to hear his logic? You want to hear his logic?
Yeah.
So his Juan, right? Huang. He goes, how did you get Juan? And he goes, well, for in Spanish, how do you pronounce Juan? Juan, right? So the U is silent. So by that respect, the U is silent.
Oh my God.
So that's how you get Han.
But that reflects a deeper problem, right? Being very embarrassed of what your name is.
Hey, absolutely a deep embarrassment. And that's how, for me, growing up in America was how to eviscerate your own cultural identity so that you can become American, right? However, I just didn't know how to change my name. Can you imagine growing up with my name in the US, Ham? My name was Ham, right? It's been made fun of in so many different ways. I got in so many fights because of my name. But that's the way it is. It's about erasing your own history. When we were studying US history, I still remember this, reading about the Vietnam War was literally one paragraph in the US history book. One paragraph, we got involved in it, we lost, we moved on. That was the Vietnam War history that I learned. So, and it never occurred to me. That's really sad. And actually, it never even occurred to me to study Asian American literature.
And it's really weird. Fun fact for people who don't know, you lived with Viet Thanh Nguyen.
Yeah, yes, of course. Yes.
King of
who is the embodiment of Asian American literature.
That is like so ironic, because them for years.
I started catching up after college. I was a late bloomer to my own culture. And I still, to this day, all the time, during every interview, I give thanks and tributes. I pay tributes to Club O Noodles. That theater group turned everything around for me. Look, I was so Americanized that I forgot to speak my own language, forgot to focus on, Asian literature, Asian studies, and all that stuff. Until 1996, I went to see a play, by Club O Noodles down in South Coast Repertory. And their play was called Laughter from the Children of War. And I saw that and I was laughing and crying. The woman I was dating at the time, was, Canadian American, she was white American. She just didn't know what I was laughing at. She didn't really know what I was laughing at. But she had all of her friends were Asian, but it was very different, right? So when I saw that play, I was like, that's it. I'm Vietnamese. Yes, I'm Vietnamese. All these stories, that's me. I lost touch with that. And there's sketch comedy, so there are scenes where like just feeling so embarrassed about your own country, feeling embarrassed that you have your friends come over your house and everything smells like mum or mum rook, and so there's all that stuff, or even like not like speaking English with a heavy Vietnamese accent. Like when I was in high school, that was such a turnoff for me.
Yeah.
And it's now looking back, it's so embarrassing for me. It's embarrassing to see like that was the me in high school that completely did not even understand his own culture.
Ham, you totally did a number on me. I don't know if you remember.
Oh yeah, no, I didn't do a number on you. My friend did a number on you. I instigated it, but she tore you a new asshole.
God, it was
Tina tore you the asshole. It wasn't me.
I always tell the story of it was actually you and Stefan or Anderson, but I don't remember. I remember now Tina being there.
I instigated and Tina tore you the asshole.
I remember that night because it did change my life, Ham. It changed my life. Up to that point, I was living in this reoccurring imagery of me being something that I was way removed from. And then there was Obama, Barack, and Michelle on screen, and one of you, it was either you or Tina it was you that pointed to him, and you're like, wait, you have a problem with that? And then it just like changed it flipped the script. That programming just totally seeped into my body like, you are a white person. It's okay. And I used to walk around in the neighborhood that I ironically live in now. I used to walk around like once a year. And then when I did walk around, I would feel like, oh, I'd go get Hainan chicken at Savoy and I'd be like, whoa, it's like all Asian people here. It's like, it was rough. Cause I was coming from like the Koreatown area or Westwood area. And then entering out into Alhambra, it was just so like a stark difference. It was like all Asians. It's ironic I live there now with the Asian, like with the whole Asian community.
I gotta tell you, Ken, the power of shame is underrated. Power of shame is underrated. Because like I said, like after I watched that Club Menudo show, I felt ashamed of myself.
Yeah.
I felt ashamed. I had turned my back on my own culture. Like I had not known that it's okay to be Vietnamese, to be Vietnamese American, that we are a product of both culture and you can keep the best of both rather than lose one for the other. And every time I went to the Club of Noodles meetings, the Club of Noodles rehearsals, I always felt like, man, I'm so white. I'm so white. And so I threw myself into Club of Noodles so that I could reconnect with my Vietnamese roots, to try to speak more Vietnamese when I was there, but I was always very embarrassed, But that's when I started practicing my Vietnamese again. And then by then it was a little bit too late. I had to, just graduating college and just getting into film school. And so film school was where I did my best to really reconnect and did my research. And that's how you see my influences. You could see it changed from my 2-minute film, my very, very first film ever made in film school, ever made in my life. It was called, this is a perfect example of my process of growth, right? Yeah, my progression. My very first short film was called Sisyphus, right? Oh my God, right? Right? It was a short film, and the whole thing is this: I did it was a conceptual film because you only had 2 minutes. You had to shoot it in one weekend. What are you going to shoot in one weekend, right? Because this is training for us to make short films. So I did this short film, and the story was the footsteps, like baby feet running up the stairs, teenage childhood, like the toddler feet running up the stairs, teenager's feet running up the stairs, and then an old man's feet running up the stairs. And by the time he keeps going up the stairs and going up the stairs and going up the stairs, don't know what it is. And then finally you follow an old man going up the stairs. He finally reaches the top of the stairs and you turn around and it's a slide and he just slides down, right? Whatever, right? Now I hold, right? I'm a writer, right? I write literature. Because, like life, we go up and then we just come down. We go up and come down. That's life, right? So that was my first short film ever, right? And it wasn't until like my teacher, AP Gonzalez, when he was teaching us screenwriting, he's like, you got to write from who you are, what you know. What do I know? Who I am? Who am I? That was a serious question I had to ask. Who am I? What do I know? What is it from my own background? But the interesting, I had started that before when I was in an undergrad. I started writing a play called Rubber Plants. I don't know where it is right now, but it's really cool. It was all about, my family, just like my dad. And it was about it. I was a huge fan of Tennessee Williams, okay, and Sam Shepard. So it's all family dramas, right? It's really, family is such an amazing topic that you can just sink your teeth into it for years and years and years and years, just to try and understand the dynamics of family. So I was like, okay, so that I know it's about family. And the really big person that's always a shadow in all of my works was always my dad, right? He was always this big figure that casts a shadow on my work because, and not in terms of I had to follow in his footsteps, but the shadow is in that you can't do it.
Yeah.
Why would you do it? Who would pay you to see your story? He used to say that to me all the time.
God.
And so, but however, now here's the interesting thing though you have to understand about Asian parents. He only said that to my face. But behind my back, he was praising me. He was telling stories about how well I was doing. Wow. You see, that's fucked up, right? Right? So he was supportive, but that's his way of showing support, is to be challenging. It took me years to understand that. But anyways, so what did I know? What am I gonna do for my first official short film? That was just a test. This is my first short film. So I ended up writing The Prescription, the story about a little kid whom his dad sends out to get a prescription filled, right? And his dad spoke Cantonese, Chinese, because I couldn't find anybody who speak Jiudao. So actors, all Chinese actors were speaking, Cantonese or Mandarin. So and Peter Fan was like a comedian. So he played this herbalist, and his was great. His Cantonese is really funny. So my first short film was about a little kid who gets, batuk, he took baka. His dad sends him, and he goes, walks around, and then he sees all these herbs, and he's fascinated by this seahorse, this dried seahorse that's in the herbal package, and he was like, oh, he wants to touch it, but the herbalist won't let him touch it. He was like, no, this is your dad's medicine. So he's like, take this home to your dad. So the kid goes, okay. He grabs the prescription. And of course, on the way back, he sits down and opens it so he can play with the seahorse. And he plays with the seahorse and the wind blows the packet away. All he has is a seahorse and a piece of paper. He's like, what am I gonna do? He's walking home, he's like hitting things with a stick, he's hitting the fence, and he sees the trees and he just smacks the tree. And then he sees the bark just like fall off the tree. He examines the tree bark. It's like, so then in the montage, because he's running around the streets, climbing up trees, collecting dried leaves, like scraping up a little dried grass from the sidewalks, and he's filling up all this stuff, and he's packing it down. And then the finishing touch, he has to put the seahorse back on top. So he puts the seahorse back on top. He wraps it up. He's picking stuff, he's falling, he's got leaves all over his back. So he walks back into his house. His dad sees him with the leaves all over his back and goes, opens up the herbal packets, and picks him up, cleans him off. So instead of yelling at him, because we start the film, he's like this big stern dad. Instead of yelling at him, just and then I had this trick shot where the camera was with the boy, and so his world was like spinning when the dad picks him up and sets him down and then cleans his face. And so that was my first official short film. And so that progression, that came from the roots of ethnic Chinese Vietnamese. Then came Pomegranate, right? Pomegranate was my second short film ever. And it came from a poem called Pomegranate that I had written for Club Menudos. We were commissioned by the Amherst College to do a play. And so back in the 1990s, 1998, something like that. And we were all each supposed to write something for the play, because that's how we work. We contribute our own writings to the play, to the performance. So I wrote this poem, Pomegranate, for my grandfather, because I came over to the US when I was 8 years old. He died along the way while coming over to the US. He died in the Philippines. We never got a chance to see him again after we left Vietnam. And I remember very specifically the evening that we received the phone call that he had died. And I was playing with my Legos. And my dad gets off the phone. He goes, "Grandpa's dead." Oh, okay. And I kept playing with my Legos. I never knew. But I was really close to my grandpa when I was a kid. So when we were living in Vietnam, we were living in this home where, the old Mai Lan was taken out because we couldn't use it anymore. And so it was boarded up to his room, right? So it was boarded up. And so every morning I would sneak through, I'd take out the board and I sneak into his room through that, because you're not supposed to disturb, ông nội, right?
Yeah.
And so, his bedroom door is closed. And so I'd sneak into his room that way. And I wake him up in the morning that way. And then we go out to the backyard and we'd water his pomegranate plant, right? He had a lot of plants, a lot of trees and stuff in the backyard. So I just help him water. Either I was helping him or I was helping my grandmother make cơm tấm, because she sold cơm tấm in front of the house every day. So that's what I remembered. And it wasn't until, and this, I'm sorry for such a long story, yeah?
No,
it's a cool story.
Yeah, fascinating.
So I was talking to my dad and I was like, I wonder why Grandpa was always so fascinated with pomegranates. Why do you like pomegranates so much? And then we heard that he had died because of cancer, right? So my dad told me, oh yeah, pomegranate, the word pomegranate in Chinese, right? Liu, right? And then I go, well, that sounds strange. Sounds like the word for love. And Liu, what does Liu mean, right? I'm an English major. I love language. I always like to see how language is put together. So he's like, love, slippery love, because Liu sounds like, like the word for slippery. He's like, slippery love? He goes, no. Xue means little pebbles, little things. Liu is like cancer. So pomegranate, the word that's put together to make the word pomegranate is cancerous stones, right? And then when I heard that, it always stuck with me. My grandpa died of cancer, but he had this fascination for pomegranates, growing this pomegranate tree. And so I wrote this poem about this kid who was coming to terms with understanding about his grandfather's death, right? And so it's all based on my reaction to understanding pomegranates and to understanding death and to reconnect with my grandpa. And so I'd taken that poem and written it into an experimental film. I'd never done experimental films. I was never one for those, you know me, I'm very wary about art films, right? I'm very, but I took all those visuals and you could see it in Pomegranate, the short film. So it starts off with the little boy crawling through and waking up his grandpa, and then going to water the pomegranate plants with him. And back then, I think like Adobe had just started, right? So After Effects had just started, they just released. So I was taking classes, I was learning how to do mixed medium and doing visual effects. So I shot, and this is crazy, this is a crazy experimental film. I shot the whole sequence of him playing with his grandpa and everything on 16 millimeter film on a Bolex. And what's cool about a Bolex is you can rewind and shoot the same strip of film many, many different times if you just block off the frame where you want to expose. So I created this diagram with my cinematographer, and we broke the frame up into 8 different sections and reshot that same 8 different sections 16 different times, because sometimes half a take would be of this image of them watering the garden. Another would be a close-up of him playing with the plant. There's this plant that I'm very fascinated by. It's called the shy plant. MAIKA, it's called MAIKA.
Yeah.
So it's a plant that responds to touch. When you touch it, all the leaves fold and the plant just goes down. That was also like a metaphor for me about life and everything, right? So that was in the film. So we shot that part on 16. Then we took the 16, projected onto a screen, and shot that on 8 millimeter. So we see the projection of him with all these fragmented images, and it's flashing because we're double exposing and stuff. Images is flashing, everything like that. And when the film ends, a light appears. And so it was the panel. We put the screen in front of the panel where the boy crawls in. So he crawls through the panel into the room, and we continue that on 8 millimeter. Once he wakes up, so the idea is, the film is a really easy concept. Boy every day wakes up his grandpa by crawling through the thing and then touching his grandpa's nose. Grandpa would fake him out and then shock him. And they would go water the pomegranate tree until one day he comes in and sees many people surrounding his grandpa, and he couldn't come in. And so the next day he crawls back in again. He goes up to his grandpa and he touches his nose, touches his nose, touches his nose. Nothing happens. And then you cut to a close-up. You cut to a pan. We put a pomegranate tree in the middle of a soundstage, projected all those images on the screen behind the pomegranate tree, pan through the pomegranate tree, come back to the face of the boy, who's now understanding what it meant to lose his grandpa, and he cries, right? So that's the film. So I wrote that in English and Judao, and I read it myself. I was gonna have somebody read it, but then my friend Sonny was like, "No, man, you wrote the poem. You need to read it." And I was like, "I hate my voice. My voice is terrible." He goes, "Yeah, everybody says that. Just record it." And there was one section where he's like, and I remember that he's a really good director too. He goes, "Just talk to your grandpa." So there was one section of the poem that was not written in the film, that's not written, where I talked about it, and I spoke into Teochew. However, so this is where I start to put my bicultural background together. The songs were all Vietnamese songs, right?
Right.
Because that's what I grew up learning when I was in the household, these old Vietnamese songs. So I played that. So that's the music that I use. So it was Vietnamese music, English recital of a poem in English, but in Chữ Châu, right? Made into a film. So that was my next progression. My third progression was the anniversary, Ngày Dỗ. See? And that,
where can we see all these films? Do they live online somewhere?
Yeah, I can share a Vimeo link with you. I can share a Vimeo link with you. You can make it available.
But I
don't mind.
Like through the history of Vietnamese films and sort of this historical aspect, when we're looking at this, wouldn't it be cool to have a link at the bottom description of the the podcast? Are those public?
No, that's fine. I'll share it with you so you can add it to the podcast.
Yeah, I've always, because I've heard about these through Anderson and through other people, but I've never had the courage to say, Hem, can you, Can you let me see it? Not courage, but it was never appropriate timing to say, hey, Ham, I'd like to see your body of work, but I'm, of course,
I don't I don't think I ever kept Sisyphus, so that's probably the only film that you can't see.
But the other ones are digitized, like the anniversary and
Unfortunately, the only copies that exist are like 480p quality or 720p quality, right? And I'll say this on the podcast, as I've been saying, I'm still waiting for an angel investor to help donate the money, because Journey from the Fall no longer exists on film. It's dead. It's gone. The negatives are gone. Negatives are gone. We only have, because when film died and the lab closed down, our lab in Thailand threw away all the negatives. So we don't have negatives for that film anymore. So we can't even tell us any from the negatives to do a 4K scan. So luckily, I did donate a print to UCLA and a print to Visual Communications, so we can scan from the print. And somewhere my producer Lum tells me there's a D2 tape, but that's like, you know, HD quality, right? A D2 tape maybe is HD quality, and it could be 2K.
And these are all 35s, right?
Originally they were on, yeah, Journey from the Fall was shot on 35 millimeter film.
So can we take the 35 and just digitize it? I mean, you can't.
You can, but you know, like digitizing from a print is very different than digitizing from a negative, because you don't get the full information. The negative retains all those information. The print, the colors of the print will fade, scratches and stuff like that. You know, there are things. So you're not going to get the perfect, pristine version of the film. So that's it, man. Journey from the Fall. That's it. It's gone.
What about the DVD that it all went to? Didn't
yeah, so the company that released Journey from the Fall went under, right? Imagination went under. So a lot of their stuff, I don't know where they kept all the masters, you know. I have one DVD master. It's the set that's where all the DVDs are pressed from. But again, that's still a 720 version of the film. It's not a 1080. It's not a 2K. It's nothing, right? So I have it, but the quality is only like a 720p quality of the film. Really sad. So just waiting for an angel investor who's willing to give us the money so we can remaster this thing and digitize it to keep it for posterity, because we never did. Yeah, so so the next evolution was the anniversary, and from there I had stumbled in between that time when I made Pomegranate and the anniversary. I stumbled on my dad's old cassette tapes that he brought all the way from Vietnam.
Music,
or I don't know how he got them. He got them maybe through his friend or something like that. But they're all old classic golden oldies Vietnamese songs, like Si Phu or Công Sơn songs and things like that. Oh man, I was listening to these 5 cassette tapes. I was falling in love with the music. I was like, oh, the music's so beautiful. Some of this stuff is amazing. So it always stuck in the back of my head. So as I was writing Journey from the Fall, I used to listen to this and I go, oh, this song would be perfect to be played at this part. This song would be perfect to play at this part. So I always write. I'm always listening to stuff when I'm writing. So a lot of that stuff gets incorporated into the writing itself, where the song is already, the music is already in there. And we did Journey from the Fall like that too, because there's a guitar theme that I had written into the script. And so Chris, my composer, he wrote a guitar theme that we eventually rehearsed, and then we shot with that theme. So that was already written by the time we shot the film. But the anniversary came through sort of, my wanting to learn more about the Vietnam War, other than the one paragraph that I read in the history books. And what started it was when we were on a Club of Noodles retreat, and I stumbled in a bookstore. It was in Big Bear. Stumbled in some old thrift bookstore, which I hate Amazon for killing bookstores, right? But I'm a huge fan of Amazon now. And I listen to audiobooks and everything. I'm addicted to Audible. But stumbled on this into this old thrift bookstore and found 3 books. One was called The Temptation to Exist. It's a weird, obscure French philosopher whose whole premise of the temptation to exist is that in order to grow and become, you have to burn everything in your past, right? In order to create something new, you have to destroy everything old. The other were two books from a series, a Time Life series book on the Vietnam War. So Time Life had published this 10-book series, and the only ones that were available was like the third book and then the last book. So I bought those two. The last book, flipped through it, had a photo of a woman, and it talked about the aftermath of the Vietnam War and boat people. And there was a photo of a woman who was being rescued from her boat, brought onto a bigger boat, a big Navy boat. She was wrapped with a towel, and her whole chest area was scarred. And the caption said that her mom threw hot water on her to keep her from being raped by pirates. And then I remember my story my aunt told me. She escaped by boat. She was a boat person. And the only reason why she survived was because she had broken out with chicken pox. So on the boat, she was leaving on the boat, and it was filled with like 30 people, whatever. She had chicken pox. And so they said, we're really sorry. We have kids on this boat. We don't want you to, we don't want our kids to catch chicken pox. We have to throw you over. They were going to throw her over. And in the middle of the night, the pirates attacked. And because she had chicken pox, they didn't want to touch her. Right? And in the morning, they were rescued, and then they were towed into Hong Kong. They were towed in. The story didn't end there. They were towed into Hong Kong, and then the Hong Kong government didn't want to accept them, so they set their boats
back
out. But they started breaking their boats, so they towed their boats back in. Yeah, that's a very common story. I mean,
what do you mean they start breaking their boats? They tore it apart so they wouldn't have to.
They tore it apart so they would sink. So for humanitarian reasons, they had to rescue them.
Man, how far out are they? Are they just like in
no, they were being towed out to sea. So as they were being towed out, they just broke the boat. Right? But that's, and then when we were making Journey from the Fall, we kept thinking, there's so many stories left to tell. Like we had to set a limit. Where are we going to draw the line on which story we're going to tell? Because we were like, man, this is not enough of the boat people story. When we kept telling ourselves, Lum and I, we're just the first, man. Hopefully this film will go out. People will see it and inspire them to make more films. We didn't know. For the last 15 years, nobody's ever made a film to follow up Journey from the Fall, from the community or otherwise,
I want to talk about that. That's like something I was just thinking about as you're talking about the memories of different projects you're making. It's an evolution of who you are as an artist, and things grow, we evolve, countries evolve, and the memory of the trauma 15 years ago in your mind as you made that film, things are changed. Do we need, at this point, to go back as a community of traumatic survivors to retell the story, or do you think that benchmark of Journey has been enough for our community to move forward?
See, here's the thing. I feel like retelling the story is not about opening old wounds. It's to reconcile with our past. I think that a lot of people misunderstand that process. It's not to pick up the old scabs, right? But if you don't know where you came from, how do you know where you're gonna go? Right? A lot of people don't know. Like there are Vietnamese all over the world, and most of the time the reason is because they left after the Vietnam War, right? As refugees, right, of the Vietnam War. And so that in itself carries a lot of trauma for the community. And that trauma, our community has never, themselves, they haven't spoken about it outside the community. right? It was always this thing where it's embittered them, okay? And they haven't had a chance to tell. And when they're watching movies come out about the Vietnam War, and it's Platoon, it's Full Metal Jacket, it's Casualties of War, and it's time and time again, it's all about the Americans, Apocalypse Now, all about the Americans, nothing about the Vietnamese, nothing about how, Southern Vietnamese soldiers, felt they lost their country, they lost everything, they had to move on, and so it's this thing, and it's held so tightly. It's a fist, right? It's a fist that's so tight that there's no blood that's able to circulate. And that's where our communities are getting stuck, and we can't move forward.
We're still in that stuckness.
Of course, and that's the reason why, that's the reason why I made the anniversary. To let you know, this is the reason why I actually made the anniversary. Was because the anniversary, what is the message of the anniversary? We're all in the same family. We're all casualties of war. Okay? It's the Vietnam War is a civil war. It's, Southern Vietnamese versus Northern Vietnamese it's a civil war. And people don't see it that way, because America is just a huge figure, such a huge figure. And they only think about that, right? And also, and the idea is like, well, this is maybe like at the time I was making the film, like when people talk about Vietnam, they still associate Vietnam with the Vietnam War, right? Nowadays it's a little different, right? You don't see Vietnam, you don't necessarily associate Vietnam with the Vietnam War anymore. We're getting to a stage in history where we've moved past that, right? However, that doesn't mean that we should just go there and then just forget. And I don't think that remembering necessarily is antithetical to that movement, to that progress. Okay. I actually believe that we need to resolve this. We need to deal with this within our own community.
So we're not done with it yet, right?
No, man. Until the world knows the story and listens to the story and then move past, that's okay. Right. And I always try to compare, our history with World War II, and you think about Schindler's List, and you think like, how many years did it take until a film like Schindler's List was made that really talks about the Holocaust, right? And so it takes time, man. It takes time to move, to understand the history, to understand the pain of that history. Like I said, spend half our lives growing and the other half recovering from that growth, okay? And so our community is still growing, but we still have a lot of recovery to do.
Yeah,
I did. Go ahead.
It's so tough to. Yeah, I'm glad we're talking about this, because part of me says we have to move on in these conversations that I have with the older generation, 80s and 90s. I had a conversation with Bac Lê Xuân Khoa. He's like a OG of the OGs, talking about the history. He goes, did you know in the thousands of years that the Vietnamese were around, we had wars, but we never had to leave? Profound shit. You had the Chinese, you had the Koreans, you had the French, you had all these Americans, you had all these people coming in. But the Vietnam War, because of the Americans, that was the first time that we had to leave the country. So you can't really reconcile from within the country. You have a body of people that are diaspora that's existing on the outside.
That's what I'm trying to say, though. We cannot reconcile what happened, with the war. We can't reconcile that history. That history is done. That we can reconcile our community, though. What happened to us after the war? What happened to us as a family? Right? I don't know how it was growing up for you, but our dad was kind of, he was a violent dad.
I think all dads. I mean, when you talk to, if they weren't violent, they were just off.
But their abuse came from this bottled up frustration.
Yeah.
Why am I here? Why have I lost everything? And why don't my freaking kids understand that?
Yeah.
Why aren't they doing their best to realize that in any minute, in a second, they could lose everything that they have? They could lose everything that they have. We did well before the war. After the war, we were poor. When we left as refugees, we stayed in the refugee camps in Thailand. You know, my mom and dad sold their wedding rings so they can buy migoi for us.
Same story, man.
And I still have memories of standing in line in the lunch lines with a bowl, waiting for it to be served, standing in the dirt in the refugee camp in Thailand, waiting for them to scoop out our dinners for us, or lunch for us, or breakfast for us, right? I have memories of that. I still have memories of that. I'm still haunted by memories of my childhood, right? Still trying to reconcile. And that's the thing with our community, is that it doesn't matter what we're saying about Vietnam today. You know, it doesn't matter if Vietnam is moving on. People have to move on. You know, people have to move on. You can't fault them for wanting to move on. Yeah. But you can look back and say, how do I reconcile with what happened to me? Okay. And I feel like, so when people ask why I made Journey from the Fall, I didn't make it as a political statement. I made it to heal families.
Yeah. Yeah.
The whole purpose in making Journey from the Fall is to bridge this gap between the generations of Vietnamese overseas, to get the dialogue started.
Yeah.
You know, part of our process when we were casting, we were doing auditions. Our auditions completely different from any audition that you've ever known. And that's only because Lam and I, we didn't want to cast actors, because to tell you the truth, there were not very many Vietnamese American actors at that time in 2003. So to say that we want to cast, it's like, what are you going to do? Who are you going to get? You know, you get Dustin, you get Ko Kyu Jin. That's it. You've spent. That's it. You know, there's not even a Hong Zhao back in the day, right? And even now, like, how many Vietnamese American actors can you actually list in your hands, right?
Vietnamese too. I mean,
yeah. So the thing is, but fortunately, of course, there are more, and I'm very happy about that. I'm happy about the progress that we have made. But back then, there wasn't any. So that's one. But the other thing is this: I also didn't want to cast actors. I want to cast real people, because I also knew what I didn't know. I didn't know a lot. And I think that's always been the thing that actually driven me in a lot of my works, is to know what I don't know. I always try to ask myself, what don't you know? And if you don't know it, you better know it if you're going to be making a film about it, right? I do this talk with a group of directors, and I go, as directors, you're world makers.
Yeah, it's your job.
You make the world that people see on the screen. Yeah. So if you don't know anything about the world, you better go learn, right? And every film is a different world. So if you don't know about that world, you better go know about that world.
Can I ask you something about the process of creation? Because it's been on my mind ever since how do you know when something's finished? Whether it's editing or writing or direct, like, how do you know when a take is done?
A take is done when the energy is done, when the energy has been spent. That's when the take is done.
When you're cutting,
when it's been captured. When you're cutting it, you know that you've cut a scene right when you've captured the energy. It's all about energy. It's energy in performance. It's energy that's even in lighting. Lighting is an energy. Sound is an energy. Everything is energy. All right. Making film is capturing that energy, and then, you know, creating that world and letting that world and its energy shine and affect people, right? And you know when it's done, when that energy is coming through. You know a scene is right when that energy is complete.
And I can imagine when you're writing scenes, and, you know, if you get the maximum pop of energy to
oh, don't. Yeah, but even in my writing, I think I'm too rushed in my writing. In these days, I'm trying to get more time in writing. I think in the past, I think the reason why Journey still to this day is my best work was because so much time and energy was put into the writing. I had first written it in film school for my screenwriting class, but that was a pass where it was the ignorant pass, I call it. There's so much in it that was so ignorant. And then there was the pass that took shape after we did the auditions, because we actually ended up talking with people who had been through it firsthand. And so, the scene where they first arrived in the re-education camp and the guy's giving the speech, I didn't write that. My speech was terrible. My speech was written on this, all the whatever, content I was able to research. But it was very different because we went up there and then, back Joseph. Yeah, his name was Joseph at the time. We met him in San Jose. He had a northern accent. He came. He was a re-education camp prisoner. We had the scene. I'd given him the stupid side that I'd written that scene. He's probably one of the few that I actually gave a written script to, a scene to read. He read and goes, do you mind if I just go off of this and just do my own thing? I go, yeah, no, sure. Please feel free to. He goes up there and he's boom. 5 minutes he went on. I go, that's amazing. How did you do that? He goes, well, it's hard to forget when you hear the same speech for the last 3 years of your life. Every night. So it's ingrained, it's burned into my memory.
Shit. So is that verbatim?
Verbatim.
We see on screen?
Verbatim. He goes, that's what I heard every night for 3 years. Every night I hear this speech. So that was him, our re-education camp. I had gotten the schematics from an OC Register article. They came up with the 25-year anniversary of the Vietnam War article. It was on the Sunday papers, and it was a huge double-page spread with the whole picture of the layout of a re-education camp. So when I did my interviews, I took that and I went to like the Vietnam Vet Associations in San Jose and in San Diego. And I said, what do you think about this? What would you say? Is this correct? Is this not correct? How would you change this?
Yeah.
So I got consultations on how to create barracks, yeah. And to the point where we built it, and then we redid the whole thing. We did it to spec so that our actors, when they came to set, they wept. Because, we were shooting in Thailand and we built it in this basin. And when they got there, they're standing at the top of the basin, looking down at this camp, they wept. They said, it's like being transported, because I knew that I didn't know so much, man. And so I needed to surround myself with people who knew. And so that casting process, we just invited people to tell their stories. I said, it doesn't matter if you're an actor. It only matters if you can connect to the story. If you have a past that is similar, that's where acting comes from. Yeah. Acting comes from your own stories. If you know your own stories, you can be an actor, but you have to know your stories and you have to be honest with your emotions. And so our audition process is just seeing A, whether they had that story, B, whether they can connect emotionally to that story. A lot of people have built a wall around it so that when they talk about it, they don't, right? Some people came in and some people heard that, oh, this group just wants to hear stories. So they just came in and told us stories. And we're like, so are you interested in the film? We're like, what film? I thought you were making a documentary. You just want to hear these stories, right? Other people like my friend, Alan, his dad, he's one of the investors. His dad came in and told us a story for like 45 minutes, re-education camp story, We're like, wow, that's incredible. Now we understand why Alan invested in this film, because he knew this story. He goes, no, Alan doesn't know this story. I would never tell him. I was like, why wouldn't you? Because it's so painful. He doesn't need to hear this kind of story. That's why we are stuck.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. What kind of story do we need right now? Like 15 years later, where
we still need to hear these stories. Look, the families still need to tell these stories about their pain, about their hardship, about what they felt that they've lost, because it doesn't matter. Vietnam has moved on, but their hearts have not moved on. Their hearts have not been resolved. It's these
The diaspora
energies that
hearts.
have been locked into their,
Yeah.
yeah,
Diaspora hearts.
exactly.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
diaspora.
A lot of
Vietnamese
these guys are
diaspora.
dying off. Like my dad, his brother, you know, a few of these, they're basically all gone.
Yeah.
And
But the community is still, you know, as you know this, we're still divided. The Orange County community, we're still divided. We still, but there are still those who still carry this on for their family. And it's completely understandable. But now we have to go back and actually really tell these stories. I think that it's all about like, look, man, why does a film like Schindler's List have to be made? Because the world needed to know. Because if the Jewish people felt like the world now knows their story, they can understand them, right? There's, our people are exactly the same. We're exactly the same. We need these stories to be told so that people know, right? Once they know, then we can move on.
yeah, but I'm going to not, I'm not even playing devil's advocate. I'm really asking from a sincere place. Okay. I I am an advocate of moving forward with reconciliation. I'm an advocate of hugging, you know, both sides, hugging, finding a way to rebuild and finding a way to move on. So if we do tell this side of the story, how does that make the new world of Vietnam feel, or the government of it, you know?
Look, man, look, and this is what I say, you know, it's never been about bigger politics. World politics is not about big world politics. It's literally about family healing. All right. That's why don't even go there. Don't even go there and think about the bigger world politics. Okay. This is a traumatic event, like every traumatic event. You have to reconcile with who you are now, with what has happened to you.
That takes a lot of
Of
courage.
course it does.
The filmmaker who are the producers, the guys who are putting that project together, it takes a lot of guts to step up to the plate and put together, you know, this ability to get the community to put it out there. And I mean, it's basically a therapy session, right? But like,
Yes. But that's what our audition was. Our audition was a therapy session for 400 people.
Schindler's List is a therapy session.
Absolutely. And that's what I'm saying. That's, you know, that's why, like, I don't want to, I've never been a political filmmaker. I was never driven to make films for a political statement. I've always been about the family. The message has always been very simple. At heart, it is a story about a family. Okay. And a journey from the fall is, how does this family move on? How does this family move on? And so that story of Lilai and Lilai, it was retold so that we can understand that the sword has to return, meaning like the faith needs to be restored in the family so that the family can move on, right? The symbolism is the parallel. It's not about politics. It's about hope. It's about understanding. That figure of the mom, right, was based on my childhood friend Nya and his mom, who is a recluse. Every day we come over to his house, his mom is upstairs in her own bedroom. She never came down. And every time she was upset with him, she'd go, "Mẹ mày chết rồi. Mày biết không? Mẹ mày chết rồi."
Yeah.
So those words, they weren't created. They came from somewhere very real. And I saw how it killed him every time she said that to him. How does he reconcile with that? And so, and then I start now, you know, and then of course, you know, after college, looking back, trying to understand, why did she say that? What must have happened to her? Where was her mentality? Where was it coming from? That's what inspired the idea of the character of Mai, was when a person who's been through that experience, who's now looked at the world in terms of, you know what, I'm dead. And the only reason why I'm alive right now is for my son. But for myself, I'm dead. Right? And for her to be able to see life beyond that, that's where she can start to move on. Right? The book coming back to her, an affirmation that her husband is dead, that part of her life has now is done. Now she can move forward and be more attentive to her son and to be more aware of his issues, what's going on with him.
Did that ever happen in real life?
What do you mean? With my friend?
Yeah.
I don't know. I lost touch with him after junior high school. But that's why it's haunted me all these years and stayed with me all these years. Half of our lives growing, half of our lives recovering.
That's probably the tip of the iceberg too, of that trauma.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. You know, I mean, Lum, when I don't want to speak for him, but his father was in the re-education camp. Right. His father was executed in the re-education camps. You ask him to talk about it to this day, he still cries.
Yeah.
It's still a very painful thing for him and the thing for him to move forward from.
Right? And that's the evolution of societies, right? Whole evolution of societies is the ability to kind of, like in Germany, they're like, no, that was a bad thing that happened, and we can condemn it, and we can make it an outlaw thing. We can outlaw that, make sure that never happens. But then that takes the whole society, that whole group of Germans to kind of like, okay, we're going to legislate something into law to make sure that this doesn't happen again. How do you do that for, the rest of mankind on Earth,
I just think that the first thing you need to do is just heal. I'm not even talking about prevention, whatever you think. That's all that I'm looking at. Is at the root of it is that all things affect family. War, there's only one casualty of war. It's families. Okay? And that's universal. Okay. All casualties of wars are family. And then that's it. And that's the reason why we shouldn't have it. It destroys family. And it leaves scars that take years to heal. And so for me, that's all it is. Like for me, it's the power of film should be used to heal. Yeah.
You realize how long we've been talking?
No.
A long time.
Really? How long? No, come on. We were just like messing around. No, it's like an hour. We've been talking for an hour.
Yeah. Went by very quick, and
I told you, man. I told you, like,
captivating. But I want to move on to like lighter subjects right now because that we spent a really good time on this. It's a heavy subject, but I also, like I've told you before, I want to talk about things that I get to experience with you. What we eat, how we sing, those things that we. That's a beautiful part of my relationship and experience with you and the group of guys that we hang out with. Let's talk about the thing that I think we always toy with this idea of making movies or TV episodes about Nyao, the world of Nyao, and it is such a unique part of our landscape, right? Where do you think we have this ability to create so much variety in our food?
Oh, what? I think it's in the fish sauce.
Think about it, right?
It's in the mum.
You go everywhere in the world, and I feel like for every I don't know, 3 famous dishes in one country, we have like 30. So it's like 1 to 10 in every, like you go to Germany, you get maybe, I don't know if you can name even 1 or 2 famous dishes, maybe, but we have so much variety. Like where the fuck did that come from?
Because Vietnamese people love to eat. Well, think about it. We're the only people who eat. No, man, but we love to eat so much that after we're all full, we're talking about the other food that we want to eat, right? And I've only noticed this in Vietnamese people. Other cultures, when they're full, they're talking about other stuff. They're talking about politics. They're talking about this and that. Vietnamese people are like, but there's this other dish. It's really good. You got to try. I don't know, but yeah.
You're like the only guy that when you're back in Orange County, we go to Ben Young, that restaurant.
You love that tikkan, which is now you can't eat anymore. Come on, that's dirty.
People eat it
That's totally
people
not clean.
all of the time, you know? People,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's not. I mean, but so many of the dishes that we eat are bad if you think about it. There's a lot of stuff that we continue to eat that is illegal in the United States.
But then you look at it in terms of like Vietnamese food is the healthiest because it combines vegetables, herbs, and meats and grains and all that stuff. But there's so much vegetables, always vegetables,
Yeah,
right?
always a shit ton of vegetables.
And I think that there's so many like fruits, Vietnamese fruits are completely so healthy for you that we're still barely now still discovering all kinds of different fruits that are really, really healthy for you, right? For example, I was in Dalat and I saw this tree with this really red, nice red fruit. Oh wow, with these little veins on the skin of it, little green veins on this red fruit. And I was, what is that? You know, and it's they call it tango. So it's a tree tomatoes. And Tamarillo is I found out it's his real name. And I was like, can you eat it? And the guy goes, oh yeah, it's really delicious. So I ate it. It's amazing, right? The taste of it is like a passion fruit mixed with
Oh,
the tomato with a little bit of mango flavor in it. And then I was fascinated by it. And then I started looking up all the health benefits. It's an antioxidant. It helps prevent diabetes, you know, like heart diseases, all this stuff. I'm like, what? What? Why don't people know about it? And it's huge, and it's tons of rich vitamins in this one fruit that nobody knows about, right? And the skin is so hard. So I really liked it. So I was working with this with an actress. I was helping her doing the audio recording for her film, and I mentioned I love this fruit. She goes, oh yeah, I have a farm in the lag. She sends me a box of 10 kilograms of this fruit, which is supposedly really expensive. It's like $25 a kilogram.
whoa.
She sends me like 10 kilograms in a box. And I was just making fresh juices out of this. It was so amazing. But if you think about it, even like our mangkao sima, right? Huge antioxidant, like super, talk about the superfood that fights cancer, right? Okay. That's in mangkao, right? You have even like tanlaum, even now everybody, there's a huge fad over the red dragon fruit now, right? In the States, right?
Yeah.
Come on. It's everywhere in Vietnam and it's so cheap, you know? So we have all these fruits and we have all these herbs, we have all these things that are very, very rich. And it's a wealth of, of fruits and vegetables and, you know, that it's nutritional
But I
wealth,
feel like it's
right?
the only
That we have, and nobody knows about it. Nobody's
yeah,
yet to really talk about it.
we are the only ones who have this food like across the world. I feel like our
Mhm.
our food is so rich. I mean, I remember my
So
dad
rich.
always say that to me. He's like, okay, literature, music took from different places, you know, and we got some good stuff, but nobody can compete on the world stage, I feel like, with our food.
Yeah, and that's the reason why I like traveling with Anding Bung's company when he goes to do his shows, because first of all, I love traveling, but I love finding about more about Vietnam. I
Yeah.
guess intrinsically it connects to me. It pulls at a string that's really at my core. That yes, this is Vietnam. This is this is what makes us us, right? Um, and so and I was really bummed that I missed the chance to go up to I think it was like Bumetok or whatever. That's where he did this whole thing about Geo Geo, this old lady who's in her 90s and she's still making taffy, saltwater taffy, you know. And so there's all these things, and I think, oh, but I did get a chance to go to Minh Tây to visit the chocolate farm. Did you know that Vietnam has chocolates? Did you know that our cacao plants are amazing? They're completely delicious. And so when we went there, we had this uh, cacao plant, and this dude who took the cacao seeds. Because if you've ever had a cacao fresh, you can open it up, a chocolate plant, a cacao. You open it up, the flesh is very thin, it's very dry. There's not a lot of liquid, but it's very sweet. It's just like coffee. The skin of a coffee berry is very sweet.
But
And
you
I've
throw
had the
it out,
coffee berry
right?
too.
But you
Huh?
throw the coffee berry meat out, right? The skin, coffee berry.
Oh, I like to eat it if I have a chance. I eat it. Well, that's the reason why weasels eat it, because the skin is really yummy. And
That's
that's how we have weasel coffee,
yeah.
right? They eat the berries because once it's red, it's very delicious. The same thing with the cacao. And so when we went to the cacao farm, the guy, he said, "Oh yeah, we also have cacao liquor, like liqueur." And I was like, "What? You can?" Yeah, he goes, "Yeah, we do this for fun. We turn it into liquor." And so I bought like 2 bottles of cacao liquor, and it's so delicious. It's amazing, right? So even the skin of it, right? And this, Asians are the only people that were like, if they find one thing good about a plant, they will eat it from the leaf to the root, right? And that's pretty much a coconut tree, right? No part of a coconut tree is ever freaking wasted in Asia. We use the leaves for our furniture, for our home, for our foods. We use the heart of the stem of it. We can still eat it. The root of it you can eat. The heart of the root you can eat. It's amazing. The fruit of it, right? We use the fruit. That we use the skin, the husk of the fruit as coal, right? Right, we take the fruit and we turn it into oil, and so coconut oil, like you think about it, right? And the trunk of it is used to make homes, because coconut wood is used to make homes, and is used to make utensils and all kinds of things, right? Nothing is ever wasted. You use the entire freaking thing, right? uh, yeah, so it's the same, with the lotus, you eat the roots, you eat the leaf, you use the stem, right? Everything, the seeds, right? But yeah, no, I mean, we went to this cacao farm, and it was fantastic. It was amazing. It was amazing. Um, yeah, so there's so much of Vietnam that's still to be discovered. It's not just the
Wow.
caves, it's not just the temples, everybody just sees the pictures from Ninh, right? From the films, Tam Cam and whatever, and it's all like always about Ninh. But come on, there's so many other beautiful parts of Vietnam that's still yet to be discovered.
Yeah,
Right?
and pockets of culture that what you're talking about, like we don't know on the outside,
We don't know.
We don't.
And yeah, so that's why I mean I'm hoping they travel more with this group, right? So that I'm still learning, and that's the beauty about doing film, is that when you're an artist, and especially when you're a filmmaker, like the learning never stops.
Yeah.
The learning never stops, and I these days, and I've been telling you about this, even before the show, like sort of I got a little bit like really overwhelmed and burnt out, and with the recent films, and recently, like losing my mom in 2018, so just got really down. And what's really brought me back up is going out and seeing more of Vietnam, learning more about Vietnam. This whole idea of curiosity, right? So I read this book called Curious, and it talks about the importance of curiosity over history and mankind's history, right? Like curiosity is what drives innovations. And then another book, literally, again, it's called Curiosity. The first one's called Curious. The second book is called Curiosity.
Same writer or different writer?
Different writer. The first one is by another writer. I forget her name now. But the second book is written by Brian Grazer.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. And it's amazing. And he has this whole thing where, he attributes his success to his sense of curiosity.
Yeah.
And the fact that he when he was just starting out, he found himself in a position where he can call up people and set up meetings, right? He was inside an executive's office. So he's using that executive office to set up meetings from people all over. It started out with just people within the studio, but then it started with anybody within the film industry that he really admired and he wanted to talk to. So he was like, "Oh, I'm in this person's office, and well, I would love to have a meeting with you, a little lunch to talk to you." And so it used to be every day. He said that every day he had to meet somebody new and to talk to that person, to learn from that person. And as he got busier, it's like once every week. But then it expanded to like talking to NASA people, and that's how he got started on Apollo 13, right? And talking to CIA people,
Yeah.
And so it's just, yeah, man, the more people that you meet, the more that you feed your curiosity, the bigger your world becomes, right? And the richer your world becomes. And
I
that's the same thing.
Yeah, the thesis for this podcast was just simple. It was like, I was kind of dealing with the shame, of what you witnessed when we first met, and then in the early 2000s. I I'm still kind of unsure sometimes why we should be proud to be Vietnamese. Although I hear the stories, and I'm inundated with the pride, which I can feel. But at the same time, I think I'm on this quest to really hear the stories day in and day out, day in and day out, to hear the variety of stories and be curious about the different stories that we've produced as a people.
Mhm.
Right? Just like Brian Grazer. I mean, I interviewed scientists, Vietnamese scientists, Vietnamese, sports people, Vietnamese artists, Vietnamese anything that has like a view that has been shaped by their Vietnamese identity.
Mhm. No, I mean, yeah, and I'm really glad that you're doing the podcast, because then you're you're expanding your world, man. You know, and right now it's only the Vietnamese like diaspora, but it can grow out beyond that, right?
Yeah,
That's the
definitely.
whole idea.
Yeah. Like I would love to get to know more of Ending's, world. And
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing that podcast because he knows a lot, man. He knows a lot. He travels everywhere and he speaks to so many different kinds of
oh
people,
yeah.
and so that him alone, his the wealth of people whom he has met and the stories that he has, that's pretty amazing, you
And
know.
it's like infinity,
Um,
because there's things that like who knew there's an elder taffy making lady in this part of,
no,
you don't even think about.
no, he showed me an episode where he interviewed this blind man, this blind musician who plays for money, and he plays on the ferries. Okay, on the ferries that
Yeah.
go
Yeah,
across the
yeah.
rivers. He's been doing it for more than 30 years, right? Since because he's blind.
Fine, yeah.
But what makes him unique? He made his own guitar from a plank of wood and a pan, a pot, a bowl, a metal bowl, a tin bowl that he's flipped and he put on this board, and he's put a string across it, and he can play anything on
One
this thing.
string?
I think it's a few strings, like three, two, three, four strings. I don't know. I didn't get a close up of the instrument itself. But then, so then he took this whole show. This show, the show is called like the Lifetime show.
Yeah, yeah.
So he puts up the show, and so this guy performed in front of a group, like, and he put the show on a boat. He rented a boat, and they did a whole performance. And he had another singer that came in and sang with the dude, and so he would play. Uh, Amazing, just amazing what you can do. And so the thing is that he doesn't even have a real guitar, like this guitar he made when he was blind, and it sounds amazing, right? And so this is the kind of people that he's able to discover, he's
Tap
able
into.
to tap into, and then hear their stories. There's another old man, he's like 70 years old, I think. He's also blind, and he plays the nylon string guitar, like an acoustic guitar, like you would never believe. He's so amazing, right? So he did another concert for that man, and but he's able to you know bring the talent of these people to a wider audience, but he's able to also help them because his channel, like, you can actually donate money to these artists. So he raised like 130 million Vietnam dong from this one performance for this artist, which, how much can you make singing on a ferry every day?
Yeah, that would set that guy up for life, you would imagine, right? Can get a little plot of land out
It
in.
could be life changing, but the idea is that it's bringing awareness to the life that exists outside of who we are. I think these days people get so invested in their own image because of their phones, because of their devices. I can't tell you how so tired I am every time I go outside and I see why, like you could use that same phone and go interview somebody, right? Who cares? Who cares? Do you on a live stream what you're eating? Go talk to somebody, and it's that simple. And that's why, it just started from that simple concept of him going to interview a different person every day.
Genius.
Every day, he would go to a different restaurant and eat and interview. And so for me, that was inspiring. That was inspiring for me to get out of my own shell, because as filmmakers, we're also very locked, right? I can sit there in my
Yeah.
editing chair and just edit all day. And I forget that the world is out there, that whatever we're doing here is a reflection of what is out there. So if you don't go out, you can't reflect.
Right. Right.
If you don't capture light, you cannot reflect that light. You can't have your own source to shine. You have to go out and capture that light,
Yeah, and that goes back to what I've always learned from you and Bao and Anderson. It's like the amount of reading and experiencing life that the three of you do is it's a lot. I mean, the consumption of reading that and watching films and eating and music, it's constant. It's totally on all the time. And I think without that, you can't really digest. If you're not consuming, you really can't synthesize information.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can't evolve if you're not continuing. But the thing is that for me, the music wise, I'm a little bit stunted, so I have to actually get back on it and really, see what's out there currently, because I'm sort of so stuck in old music now. Because I feel like God, all the new music, there are no like amazing guitarists who just wail on the guitar, and that's why that's why bands like the Eagles are still have concerts and they're still playing. People are going to see them because they can actually play music. Billy Joel, he's still having concerts. He's like 80 now, isn't he? Something like that.
Yep.
But people still go see him because they're the people that could still play the music. And I feel like nowadays we kind of rehash music instead of invent music. We don't have musicians. We don't honor the musicians anymore. We just honor the vocalist, right? We put the vocalist in front of everything, but the music, dude.
But that's the problem with that's the problem with, and this is something I have in my notes to talk to you about. That's the problem with content today, right? Like K-pop or, and I'm, what, look, I'm guilty of not like following it the way some of our friends like Lee would, you have to know it to critique it. But if it sounds the same, so much of the same, it's hard to get me engaged in that world, right? Or am I not okay, are we not doing our job of sort of like living a little bit further out of our comfort
zone? No, I think it's true. I think that we're not doing our jobs. I do think that, and it's only because of my wife that I know about Blackpink, right?
Yeah,
and she only knows about them because of the Thai girl that's in it, that's in the band. But the thing is that we have to consume. We have to be open. You have to be open to the different, crafts that's out there. As the art changes, sure, you have to. That doesn't mean you have to be a fan, but you have to at least know what's going on.
I recently was introduced to a song with the group of guys like Bao and Michael. They told me about this song at the Super Bowl, The Weeknd, "Save Your Tears." Do you know that song?
No, I don't know that song.
It's like literally a song that you hear, you're like, somebody wrote this 30 years ago, sang it 30 years ago, instruments 30 years ago, the synths are 30 years, everything, the song construction, the way it's built and sang.
Was it?
30 years ago.
It feels like, or so it's a brand new song, but it's
brand new song. I cannot stop listening to it every time I'm in the car now. And it came out this year or the year before. It's a relatively new single called The Weeknd, and okay. and I've heard of The Weeknd before, but this song, it's so funny. The young people who are listening to, I sent it to my brother in a YouTube link, And he looked at it. He goes, "Okay, I am hooked." And I know that you would be hooked too, because that's that's the music that we grew up. It's like
That's
OMD
the vibe. Yeah.
vibe, right? After we get done here, I'm gonna send it to you. My brother's like, here's what's really funny about this conversation that we're having. I sent him the link, and he goes, "Oh my god, like peak peak quality. This is the shit. Amazing song." And then he goes, "Dude, this guy's huge. He has 486 million hits on this YouTube. This guy's massive in the US. And how is it that me, you, and Tom doesn't know about this song? Like,
Mhm.
now you're gonna hear about it, and you're gonna be like, okay,
Yeah.
and it's new, and it's a new song, but it could have been written 30 years ago or 25 years ago.
Well, just because I don't know about it, Tom didn't know about it, doesn't mean it's not big in Vietnam, though. You know what I mean?
Oh, it's big in Vietnam, yeah. The Weeknd, he's
Yeah.
big. He's big everywhere.
But I'll tell you, it's really funny. But dude, and this is things change, right? Time moves on, and there's the next generations out. So we were having dinner. Was it 2 nights ago? 2 nights ago, and this girl's at the dinner table. She was a model. She's 19 years old, right? And so I was talking with a producer. She's in her 30s, and she's like, oh, how come there are not that many? She said this, and I was like, are you kidding me? Right? She goes, oh, Vietnam doesn't know very many British musicians, singers. I'm like, what? What are you kidding me? Because the video Adele is playing on the screen, right? But Adele is the only British singer that is very popular in Vietnam. I'm like,
Oh, wait,
what are you saying?
why doesn't Vietnam know more about British singers? Is that what she's saying? Or why is it
No,
that
she was saying it in general. Like there aren't that many British singers that are well known. I was like,
do you know
okay.
that's the cradle of
I'm like, no. Pretty much like 90% of really amazing musicians come out of Britain, right? And I was like, but I understand, like if you're talking about Vietnam, yeah, we're slow. The masses are slow to catch on to pop music. But you'd be surprised, man. K-pop, they're all over it. They've got the latest news. We like Vietnamese youth now, they know. So anyway, so we were talking about, are you kidding me? So I was naming off bands, but then the 19-year-old look, I was like, Coldplay, come on, they're huge all over the world. Coldplay, and the 19-year-old looks at me and she goes, who?
I mean, if you think about it, that 19-year-old, when we went to the Coldplay concert, me, you, and Anderson went to Coldplay, she was 9.
Yeah.
9, right?
I know.
You blink of an eye. That was like yesterday that we went to.
Yeah. I still remember it. I still remember that concert.
The concert, yeah. It was like
very, very vivid.
Yeah, she was 9.
She was 9. But there you go. I mean, that's our job as artists. We need to know what's going on, of course, and that's the reason why it's so good to be able to like go out to Wang Cafe to meet your friends, to hang out with your friends, because that's how you can stay updated with stuff that you don't know. Because otherwise, it's so easy to get just to be here, just holed up in the cave. I call it my editing cave. Every time I'm in post, I feel like I crawl back into a cave and I don't know what the hell's going on with the world. And I rely on my friends to tell me what's going on with the world. And that's a sad statement. Like I shouldn't let that happen, right? But I get so fixated when I'm working on a film that that is my entire world, right? And I'm doing MAIKA right now, and I'll give it a little plug for MAIKA, right? But that's the film that I did for my mom. That's a film that it's a dedication. It's a
how is it inspired by your mother?
Well, it came to me, but I felt like it came to me at a very appropriate time. My mom passed away in 2018, and that I was asked by a studio to do this film. And when I read the outline, the story was about a 9-year-old kid whose mom had passed away, and he couldn't get over his grief until he met this little alien girl who helped him.
Oh, such a cute story.
So I was like, okay, that's me. And so when you watch this film, that's the whole point of the story, is how this kid, is able to overcome his grief by meeting this alien and then helping her to go home, and she helps him to reconcile his life and find new friends and things like that. It's really cute. Super cute.
Story, like who came up with the story?
And Vincent Ngo came up with the story, but originally it was based on the show that was very, very interesting. Is in the 1990s, Vietnam found a following for this TV show from Czechoslovakia that was made in the 1970s. It was called the Girl Who Fell from the Sky.
Yeah.
Right. And her name was MAIKA. Right. And so you know, it was inspired by that. So we used that inspiration, and he wrote a completely different take on it. Right. So it's I mean, it's not really a reboot, but I pay tribute to the original. But it found this huge following in Vietnam, where the youth back in the 1990s, they were, and there was only one season ever made, but people, you know, kids would come home, and it would only play during the summer, and they would come home, and they couldn't wait to come home to see this. I spoke with a small cinema chain owner, and he said, yeah, that's how we started off. We had one screening room, and we bought MAIKA, and we would sell tickets for students to come and watch this in our screening room after school. So they were selling tickets for a TV show that they would just, you know, play. But this thing was broadcast on Vietnam TV, and it was broadcast for a few years and found a huge following. Really famous actors like Tai Hua can sing the theme song, the opening theme song of it. He remembers the entire plot. He can recite the whole thing to you, you know. So it really found a generation. And so, you know, Taehyung from BHD, she was a huge fan of that. I think the idea came from Martin, who was a very big fan. And so he worked with Vincent to develop the story. They took it over to BHD, and then BHD, for years, they were trying to find the right director for it. And then they're like, oh, maybe Ham can do it, because they like what I do, because they know that I bring a different sensibility that's not very Vietnamese, but it's very new, you know. And so they asked me if I would do it. And when I read the story, it just grabbed me right away because of my personal connection to it. Yeah. And it's been wonderful. And it's so funny that the kid that we cast, and it turns out he's like a mini me, you know. I have allergies to dust and weird things, and he has weird allergies. So he was always like, no, you know. So I was like, oh man, whenever, and because we were shooting in the dirt, we were shooting in the forest and things like that. So I'd be like, okay, take a quarter of my antihistamine and share it with him.
Wow.
Because he was just like, I can't stand it, you know. And so, but he was like a mini me, you know.
Wow.
So it was great. It was really great to work with the kids, and so we got amazing performances out of it. Except that, you know, the film was shot and then COVID happened, so our production was halted, and we had to wait months and months and months, and the kids were growing. We were waiting months and months and months, and it was like 6 months later we shot the second half of the film, or the last third of the film, and we were constantly afraid that their face would change so much that you'd see it on screen, but it didn't. We were so lucky it didn't. So as I was editing it, I was editing stuff that we shot the year before and the year after, and it was still the same. But it's just huge, massive undertaking, because the things are just so spread out because of COVID that now I'm still struggling with trying to get everything organized in post. Still looking for footage.
You're done with the film?
I'm still cutting it.
Yeah, but it's all in the can, right?
It's all in the can, but it's so beautiful. But there's so much to comb through. Yeah. Because it's also the way that I shoot. I shoot very densely. Like I shoot a lot because I think it's because I came from an editing background.
Yeah.
So I prefer to see a lot more different angles of a scene. And I think I'm very different now than when I shot Journey. I was a much more simpler director in terms of coverage.
Back then.
But I think that there's something to be learned from the works that I did then and now. And so you can see that now I'm coming back to a balance, you know? Yeah. Because if you watch like Bitcoin Heist, it's a ton of coverage for that film. We shot like crazy. We shot the shit out of it, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Did you ever get to watch any episodes of MAIKA?
yeah, of course, I watched them all. That was beautiful. So that's why, like, when I was doing it, I was finding inspiration because in the show, she flies them through Czechoslovakia, whatever it is. Uh, but she she has the ability to levitate things and make things fly.
Yeah.
So she brought them on this little rocket, and then they were flying through the city, and they flew past this castle. And it was so beautiful, this old kind of medieval style of castle. Because the show was filmed in Czechoslovakia, and so I was like, oh, I should just pay homage. We need to have a scene that takes so. And Vincent was the person who first started that. So he looked at Bana Hills, right?
Wow.
And Bana Hills has all that castles and this crazy, So it was an interesting parallel. And then when we were filming it, it was beautiful. However, that was a pain too, because of COVID. We had to push to after the new year to film it. And by the time we got back up, sorry, no. It was getting close to the end of the year, and it was fogging up. Yeah, it's like we could shoot up in Bonnet Hills. So basically, by the time we were ready to go out and shoot, we couldn't. It was so thick that you point the camera and all you see is just mist. All the towers completely disappeared. You couldn't even see your hand in front of your eye, like 2 feet away.
Yeah.
Right. But the footage we ended up getting was so beautiful. It's amazing. Yeah. So we ended up like after COVID, we had to go back out there and shoot a little bit of the footage there.
We've drifted so far out, but since we're talking about kids and stuff, like when you were a kid, you didn't know that you were going to become, get into film, and then you go to school and you study English literature. Where did you make that transition over to becoming a filmmaker?
My last year as an undergrad. I think I was my junior, sophomore year. Yeah, basically, the third year I was in college. I was walking home. It's a great story. It's a Woody Allen type of story, I call it. I was walking home with my really good friend that I knew from high school. We went to the same college, UCLA. We were walking back from class, and Quan, we were talking about films that were nominated for the Oscars that year. It was Silence of the Lamb, right? And why is his name escaping me now? The Crying Game. Okay, Crying Game, Silence of the Lambs, up for the Oscars, same year. And so I was like, come on, Silence of the Lambs. Of course, Silence of the Lambs. Come on, Crying Game. It's 2 guys in a room, man, talking. God, like when you compare that to Jonathan Demme and dude, all this stuff that he did was like, come on, there's no competition. It's gonna win. It's definitely gonna win the best picture, blah, blah, blah. I get a tap on my shoulder. This guy walking behind me, right? Tall African American student. And he goes, I'm sorry, I couldn't help but overhear your conversation. I'm a theater student, right? And I have to tell you, 2 people in a room talking is so much harder than you think it is. You obviously know nothing about filmmaking or theater or, all that stuff, right? And I was like, okay. So I kind of like stopped talking about it. I was like, I better go learn some more stuff about film. So that was my junior year, that I actually started enlisting in some film courses that, that are open to undergrads, right? So I started taking like, film history, films, critical studies. Yeah. They're usually only critical studies classes. Then wait, UCLA has a film school? Didn't even know.
Dude,
Didn't even know. Didn't even know that, Francis Ford Coppola has a, alum, whatever. They have a undergrad. Yeah, but I was in North Campus, and all I had to do is go a little bit more to go to the film school. So I was like, what? So, they had one of the teaching class is an actual screening room. It's like a theater auditorium.
Yep.
It's one of the best, right? It's beautiful. And all the prints are UCLA archive prints with our pristine prints. So then I was watching all these old Alfred Hitchcock films, you know, Tarkovsky, you know, prints, these beautiful, amazing 35 millimeter prints. So I was starting to take these classes and watching all these old films, right? Like The Killing, or, you know, old film noir stuff that eventually, you know, you can totally see where Quentin Tarantino ripped from, you know, all these things. And so I started learning, and then I was like, what? There's a film school here? What? They're undergrad. So Justin Lin was an undergrad at that time, but he was already a star as an undergrad. He was making films that people really like as an undergrad. So I started volunteering for film students. So, like, you know, people would need to go get their catering picked up. So I was like, I could do it. I have a car. I'll go pick it up. So I was picking up catering. So started volunteering to helping film students. Then I applied for my senior year into film school. Got rejected. Oh, shit. So bummed. Graduated, thought I was going to teach in Montessori, write plays, perform them on the side, because I was working with a local theater group in Orange County at the lab. Then I was like, somebody said, oh, well, come on, like, you kind of got into the film late in your third year, so why don't you try again for grad school? It's like, grad school, I don't know, man. I don't know if I know that much about it, you know. So just apply. So I applied to only UCLA. It's not like I applied to USC, AFI, you know, NYU. I just applied to UCLA, just for shits and giggles, just in case, right? And then I got the letter. I remember I was still working at Victoria's Secret at the time, and I brought the letter. And I was working in the stock room, and brought the letter. And then after work, I was in the car. I was like, should I open this? Should I open this? So I opened the letter, and it said, oh, yeah, you got accepted. I was like, fuck. I was so excited, right? Oh, no, no, I said, it was the first letter that said that I got an interview. So you have to go get your interview.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, I don't know if this is correct or not correct. Becky Smith was one of our professors, and she interviewed me. She goes, it looks like we have 2 Ham-Trans who have applied. I was like, what are you talking about? The other one is in San Francisco. Was it San Francisco? I don't live in San Francisco. Is there a mistake? You know? So I'm actually kind of I'm still looking for that Ham-Tran filmmaker from San Francisco.
But did he get in? He didn't get in the program then.
Oh, it's just me. So then I was one of 21 students that got selected, and then that's when I made my first film ever. Before that, I had not made anything, you know. Yeah, and so, you know, and I came up through editing, because I found that it was very natural to me. So but then the other thing that I was really excelling at, I was everybody's AC during film school. I was really good with the camera. I was really technical. So I would go to Panavision and different rental houses to prep the camera, test it all out, the whole package and everything. I was, you know, got paid to do work as AC, you know, for features, things like that, shorts and feature films. And then I started editing more. And so I got a lot of editing gigs, editing features, you know. That's how I got my first laptop. I edited somebody's feature so that they would pay me by buying me a new MacBook Pro. And so that's how I got into, you know, filmmaking. It's just after that, starting out at UCLA. I didn't know anything about filmmaking before that.
Beautiful story.
Yeah. You don't know anything. You don't know what you're talking about. Okay, maybe I should go learn so I can talk about films.
It's strange how these things, you know, change the course of our lives, right?
Yeah, I think if it wasn't for that guy, I don't think I would have applied to film school. Literally, I don't think I would have applied, because I had my course set. I was like, you know, I'm happy just to teach, and then to, you know, play in a coffee shop and just play music, you know, write plays, right? And then teach in a Montessori school because I love kids. That's all that I thought I was going to do.
When did you first go back to Vietnam?
In 1998. 98, 99. It was for a film called Nuke, a documentary. So I think the American title is called Old Saigon. Yeah. So it was a friend that I had met through Club of Noodles, Thuy, Lê Thị Yim Thuy. She's a writer. She wrote The Gangsters We're All Looking For. It's one of the early Asian Americans, writers. She studied in Massachusetts. So Dawn was her friend who had worked at the New Yorker or something like that. She was like a contributing writer or something. So she was going to do a documentary about her family and about the fragmentation of war.
Yeah.
Because her father fought in the South, her uncle fought in the North. Interestingly enough, I was beginning to write my thesis, and I was researching because I was trying to write the anniversary. So I was researching stories, about families who had, members who fought in the South and members who fought in the North. So my friend Thuy said, oh, you should get together with Dawn because that's what she's doing her documentary about. So I was like, yeah, I'm game. And I just purchased my own little digital camera, and my friend had given me this little mini steady rig. So I met Dawn, and she goes, yeah, I'm looking for somebody to help me, be the videographer. So I said, I'll do it. And I said, if you make me associate producer, I'll donate all of my equipment, and then you don't have to pay me.
Wow.
And I'll go. So I traveled all over the country for a month with her to interview all of her relatives, and they were pretty scattered. Kentucky, Louisville, Kentucky, Texas, Florida, California, San Diego, that was for 1 month. And then 1 month in Vietnam. I was like, yes. So that was my very first time going back to Vietnam.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And
yeah.
that was
and 1998, 99, I think, something like that. And, she needed a still photographer. So I invited my friend Carol Peterson to go. She had taken photos with our film school group, for our short films. So she went, and she was the person that told me when she landed and she saw me. We came first, and then she came like about 2 weeks later. When she saw me in Vietnam, she goes, "You look like a completely different person here. You're glowing. You're glowing. You're a complete." And that's when I really felt the effect that how different I was being back in Vietnam. And so, and we traveled. When we were in Vietnam, we were so lucky because she had relatives all over the place too. So we traveled to Tây Ninh, we traveled to Cần Thơ, we traveled to Phan Rang. And Phan Rang I still remember this. I could still remember the sound and the colors because her uncle lived right up against the sea, like the beach, his backyard. Her uncle was a fisherman. So, they had that basket that you have to take, that little round basket you have to take to get to the boat. But the whole shoreline was all full of seashells. It wasn't like sand. It wasn't a sandy shoreline. It was a shoreline that's all covered with seashells. If you can imagine, all covered like this thick. And so when you're walking on it, it makes this amazing crunching sound. I still remember it so vividly. It's beautiful. And then if you're not careful, you can cut your own feet if you're walking barefoot, So we traveled everywhere. It was also my first crazy near-death experience.
Oh shit.
Because you've heard this. I've told you this before. You've never heard this story?
Near-death experiences from.
You've never heard my near-death experience story? Okay. Well, it's not like near death, like I went into a coma or anything like that. No, there was a crazy accident where we could have died. Our last day, after 30 days of all this drama and stuff that was going on, whatever, we were getting ready to go back to the US, and she goes, oh my God, I have a whole series of questions I need to ask my uncle in Cần Thơ. We need to go back to Cần Thơ.
Oh my God.
But Don, we only have another day. No, it's a 4-hour trip. We'll go there, we'll do the interview, we'll come right back. Okay, fine. So we go. We left early in the morning, and it was getting around lunchtime. I was so hungry. The van had like 7 people. It was the driver, her aunt, and in the backseat it was her cousin, Carol, myself, and Dawn, and then me. So she was sitting against the window. and her cousin sitting against the window. And it was getting closer to lunchtime, so we're taking out our little box lunches. I remember taking out I was so hungry, so hungry. Taking a spoon, about to just eat, just playing in slow motion. And then, bam, right? Just this huge slam that just boom. The next thing I knew, I was on the floor of the van. And I got up. Mouth was all open, right? My mouth was full of broken glass.
Oh, shit, Ham.
From the shadowed window of the van. So I just got up and went, it's all broken glass was in my mouth, right? And I turned around and I look at Dawn, and her arm right here had a gouge in it. Just it's a piece of meat had gone missing from her arm. And so you could see skin, fat, red, white of the bone. It's just a piece of her arm just gouged out. And I looked at her, I was like, and she didn't know, she was in shock, right? And I was like, she goes, what's wrong? What are you looking at? She turns and she just screamed. You could still hear it. Like she was so terrified. Then we realized when we finally got up, by the way, we were driving on this highway in Vietnam, on the way to Can Tha. And it's just rice fields. As far as I can see, it's just rice fields. Nobody in the fields. Right? But when and it started to rain. That's the reason why we got into an accident. After we got hit, when we finally got up, we looked out and there are all these farmers with their hands up against the van. Because the van was teetering on a ditch like this. Because the roads were high off the ground. It's from, like that, the highway is high. So the van was on a ditch like this, like teetering like this, and they were all standing there holding it up. We're like, where did all these people come from? But they're all holding it up. We opened up the door. I was barefoot. I lost my sandals. We exited the van right away, go across the street. Suddenly, a van pulled over and says, it's like a tour van. Here, you guys got into an accident. We'll take you to the hospital. We'll take you to the hospital. There's glass all over the road. I'm walking across the road, and then everybody just piles into the van. And I go, shit, my equipment, my camera equipment and all that stuff. It's like $5,000 worth of stuff, right? So I go back and people are starting to take stuff from the van. All those villagers taking stuff from the van. And I'm like, oh, no. Well, we're keeping it safe for you. Then you and I was like, no, thank you, no, thank you. So I'm just grabbing all of my gear and I'm packing it. And it's getting on my shoulders and walking across the street barefooted again. I'm cutting my feet and I'm not even feeling it. I hop back in the van with all my stuff and they go, you only took your stuff, Ham? What about our stuff? I was like, oh shit. And so this is my camera gear. We don't have this. We lose all of our footage and everything. Well, go get our stuff. We need our stuff. Go get our stuff. I was like, but meanwhile, the driver's going, we gotta get to the hospital. We gotta get to the hospital, right? So, and Dawn was lucky because her aunt used to be a medic during the war. So she took a towel and just wrapped it up really tight and tells her to just put pressure on it. So her aunt's like, we got to get to the hospital. And she's yelling at me, you got to go get our things, right? So I goes, okay, I'm going to go, but don't leave without me.
Shit.
Don't you leave without me. I'll go get it. Don't you leave without me. And they're fine, just go get it, Ham, right? So I go across, they're still looting, and I'm like, no. I'm gonna get this. So I grab everybody. So I even grabbed the driver's stuff, grabbing the driver's backpack. I grabbed everybody's bag. Now I got bags out to here like this, right? I see the Nguyen and they're like, why are you doing that? We'll keep all that stuff for you. I'm like, no. So I walk across the street, I look up, the van is gone. There's no van. No van, Ken. And my Vietnamese was just barely enough to get by at that time. So, like probably, there's the joke that DKs are always asking, Tại sao? That's the only word they know. Tại sao they said it? Yeah. So anyways, it's gone. So the guy goes, Nguyen says, well, you can just sit here and wait for them. I'm like, I can't sit here and wait for them. Fortunately, some motorcycle pulls up. I call him the Good Samaritan. He pulls up in a motorcycle. Lenny. tôi chở anh đi bệnh viện đi, right? So I'm like, what? Come on, just go on, I'll take you. But anh biết bệnh viện ở đâu hả? Yeah, dưới đây is only 15 minutes away, right? So okay, fine. So I hop on. I don't even have the hands to hold on to it. So I'm just like squeezing my legs as hard as I can up against him, right? Still raining, by the way. Still raining. I'm still barefoot. I got no sandals on. I lost my sandals. Barefoot, got all this baggage on me, and he's on a motorcycle. It's raining, and he's going vroom, down the street, right? And guess what? He's doing the same thing that caused us the accident in the first place. Because, you know, drivers in Vietnam, they're always passing lanes. They're crossing to the other side, the opposite traffic, and then coming back. Him on a motorcycle, still doing that. So, vroom, vroom, I'm on the back of his motorcycle. And I'm kind of, it's taking forever. I was like, ủa mình gần tới chưa vậy? He's like, you know, he's like, yeah, it's up there, không sao, đừng có lo. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, man, if he hits somebody and I die in this middle of the road, nobody, my family would never know where I am, how to find me, what happened to me, right? So I go, please God, just help me get through this, right? Finally, like 20 minutes later, we get into the city and into the hospital, get to the front of the hospital. We pull up and the van pulls up behind us. They got lost. They couldn't find the hospital. So they had just arrived right after we just arrived. So we all pile off. We get down. I'm screaming at her, like, you told me you would leave. You fucking left me out there, right? She's like, now, Ham, you're going to talk about this now? Just get her into the ER. So they get her into the ER. The place is packed because it's raining, tons of accidents. There are no beds available for her. So we had to wait 15 minutes for her to get a bed. Finally, we get a bed. She lays down and no doctors. They're all busy. Right? So she has to wait another 45 minutes to see a doctor. Meanwhile, the nurse goes, you need to come with me. You need to get cleaned up. And not realize the glass had hit me everywhere. There's blood all over my face. I didn't see this. There are cuts all over my face. My face was bleeding. My legs were bleeding. So she goes, you got to come with me. So she goes and she takes a swab with sutures and she's cleaning me off like I'm a leper or something. She's like, you know, standing with her arms outstretched like this. And so she cleans me off and everything. She gets me, I'm still barefoot, by the way. The hospital floors are wet because this is Vietnam, 1999 hospitals. This is like a clinic. It's not even a hospital, it's a clinic. So come back, Don's still in the bed, still hasn't seen the doctor. They go, this hospital is too busy. We need to take you to the clinic across the street. Across the street. Yeah, so here's a gurney. You guys can carry her across the street. I'm like, don't you guys have staff? Don't you guys have like nurses? Nope, we don't. So you're gonna carry her. So, okay. So I had.
You don't even wheel them over, like.
It's on a fucking stretcher, dude. So me and the Good Samaritan, who's still with me, the guy who dropped me out, the guy who drove me, right? I'm like, this is a really good guy. That's a really good guy. God, he doesn't even know us. He's all the way here. My God, right? So
money in his collection.
So he grabs one and I grab the other. We carry Dawn into across the street, still shoeless, by the way, right? And with my feet all cut, carry her across the street into the other clinic, set her down. Now the Good Samaritan goes, he's like, I'm like, đâu có tiền, đâu cái túi là trong cái you know, cái ba lô, whatever, right? And then all I had with me was like 200,000 in my pocket. So I pulled it out, I go, here. He goes, that's it? I drove you all the way from there. I helped you carry this. That's all you're gonna give me? I go, that's all I have. What do you want? Right? He's just cussing at me and then he leaves, right? So Don ends up waiting for another hour to see a doctor, right? Meanwhile, she goes, oh, you gotta contact my husband. You gotta call my husband. He's in England. She was married to a Brit at the time. So I was like, how? Oh, I still had my phone card though. So I went and found a payphone. They were still using payphone, not a lot of cell phones at the time. So I used the payphone, finally was able to reach her husband and told him about the accident, right? And he was okay, I'll make arrangements and everything. And so I get back, and finally they had taken her to the OR, to get her patched up. Now, hour and a half later, she comes out and tells us the most horrifying story
Oh shit.
ever. Right? Why did it take so long? It's an hour and a half. Like, what the fuck happened to you, Don? Her arm was bandaged up by the time she came out, and she told us. But she goes, yeah. So this is So they go inside to the doctor, to the OR, the operating room. The doctor's looking at it. There's a piece of flesh still hanging off her arm. So they're like, oh, okay, let's sew this up, right? Let's suture this up. No, we have to clean this. We have to clean the flesh off first. So they grab a pair of scissors, and they're cutting the excess stringy flesh off so they can bandage it properly. So they're cutting. She's awake. They're pumped her full of anesthesia, so she can't feel anything. But she's awake. She can see it. So they take this suture and they start cutting. And the fucking thing is, it's not sharp. It's a
jagged. It's dull edged.
It's a dull edge suture. So it's tearing more flesh than it's actually cutting. So it's like, so it's tearing the flesh, but not cutting the flesh. And she can hear it. It's like squishy sounds, right? She's like, ugh. So they go, okay, that's not gonna work. Let's just suture this up. So they start thread the needle and they start suturing. They ran out of thread. They ran out of thread. They couldn't stitch her. They could not stitch her up, Ken. They ran out of thread, so they could not stitch her up. So, you know what? Our facility is not able to handle this. She needs to go back to Saigon. They found this little plastic thing. They wrapped the loose flesh around the plastic thing. They stuck the plastic thing in her arm and then bandaged it up and gave her a whole bunch of painkillers and said, you got to get to Saigon right now. So we found a driver. We squeezed 7 of us into a 4-seater. We made our way back to Saigon. And the next day, she was out on like a 6 o'clock flight in the morning. And they couldn't find a flight for me, so I had to stay in for another day. But I wasn't the only one who was injured. She wasn't the only one who was injured. Her cousin had a broken clavicle. No, not clavicle, but the shoulder, collarbone. It was fractured. And Carol had a big concussion in the head, right? But fortunately, she was sitting on the inside, but she was 65 years old at the time, right? So a concussion is still a big deal for her. So she flew back. She went to UCLA Medical right away. And so she actually really saved Dawn because she contacted UCLA Medical, and then the instant they landed at at LAX, they drove her to UCLA. And so I think it was like 3 months later, I saw Dawn again. It's just like a little ribbon scar. You could not tell that there used to be a hole in her arm.
Wow.
It was pretty amazing. Yeah, UCLA Medical. That's like amazing. So yeah, man, isn't that crazy? So crazy. You know what happened? That's what caused the accident?
No.
It was one of those Mac 10 trucks, those big ass cargo trucks.
Oh.
Our van was going weaving in and out of traffic. He goes over in the opposite direction. He comes back, but couldn't come back in time. And that other truck just plowed and just like crumpled the entire side of the van. Because we saw the van when we got to the hospital, everything was done. They got the van back to the hospital, and the whole side of it was crushed. So her arm, the reason why she was missing that piece of meat in her arm is the window frame got twisted, right? The window frame of the van, it just took out that piece of her arm with it. It's crazy. Yeah. But it's very fortunate to have survived that.
You have like 1,000 of these stories. I mean, throughout my life, I've heard so many stories that you have. I mean, there's so many stories on top of stories that that I mean, it's riveting,
That was my first. I was like,
living in Vietnam,
you can survive that. You can survive anything.
Living in Vietnam has so many things to it, and you live in America, it's like kind of boring every day.
Kind of boring.
Kind of boring every day. And then you live in Vietnam, and it's like it's an adventure. It's a true adventure, especially when you venture outside of Saigon.
Yeah. It's true.
Saigon for years. I mean, you hustle and you're doing your job, and
But you pretty much sheltered as well. Yeah. You really gotta travel. But anyways, yeah. Now we've been talking for a long time. Shit.
Yeah, it's almost 3 hours.
Is it?
3 hours, yeah, almost 3 hours. But look, check this out. This is just the start. I tell every guest this is just the start, because I mean, as projects come out, I mean, when do you release MAIKA?
Now, because everything has been pushed back, films are supposed to be releasing are now releasing in April. So we were hoping to be done by May, but I'm still cutting. So I think we're probably gonna try to aim for something like August. But I think it was always meant to be.
Yeah.
Because this film it's either an August film or a Christmas film. Because the holiday that's captured in the film is Jungto.
Oh, okay.
And that's my favorite holiday. Always.
Yeah, it's magical.
It's magical. And so for me, I'm okay if it was like it. I think that cinemas don't usually like the Jungto releases because it's like rainy seasons and kids are still in school, and so they might not like that. So we might have to push it till Christmas.
Yeah.
But I don't mind, because I feel like this film is actually so precious to me that that's why it's taken me so long, because I wanted every detail to be done right. And like I said, like it's a film that it's a dedication to my mom. So, I really wanted to have it the proper release for it.
Yeah. We've covered a lot tonight, or tonight for me, but during the day for you. And it's just a start. We are going to unfold what we can, the stories that are continuing to happen between you and I in the next time we sit down. And I want this sort of like this journey of being able to talk to you and drilling down more now that you're comfortable, and now that I don't have to like beg you basically to come talk to me, come hang out with me. I hope that we can sit back down together, because obviously I have maybe just gone through a quarter of the questions that I've. Ham, thank you so much, and we will be talking very soon. And I appreciate the time that you spent with me today.
Okay, thanks, man.
All right.
Thanks, Ken.